from other books on the subject, if it's nonfiction, and C, giving my opinion as to its value. Now, one thing I've noticed about newspaper book reviewing in the last 10 years is that in order to compete with the internet, you have increasingly had a format come up where the pictures get larger and wider margins appear in the text, and the type gets larger and larger. Now, back in the 50s, as John Leonard would remember, the New York Times, on a weekday basis, had a column which simply listed the books published that day or that week and gave a 2-line description of each one. Even listing the titles of paperback reprints down at the bottom. And then on Sunday, you would go and, spend a page and a half or 2 pages, or a page or half a page, covering these books. And, if you had a picture there, if it was not a photo of the author, it would be, a picture that did not necessarily dominate at the expense of the text.
Can you bring it to a question, just because we only have a couple of minutes left, and I don't want to exclude somebody if they have a question?
Now, the question being posed here is, how does a book editor balance the need to present a review long enough to give the reader only an idea of what the book is about, or whether the reviewer regards the book as worthwhile, with this idea that page itself as a visual thing, is significant. See, the Washington Post book world nowadays, one of their full-page reviews is perceptibly shorter than one of the old half-page NYTBR reviews from the 70s. And as a result, the length of the review almost mandates sometimes that the reviewer can do no more than almost state the jacket copy.
I'm going to intervene just to say, okay, size matters, and it's a size matters question.
The misery that graphics has brought into the world of book reviewing is infinite, and the depth is we drown in it. I can tell you, I've been a television critic for New York Magazine for 23 years, and the number of words that I get to a page in New York Magazine has gone from 1,250 to 750, and to no purpose that I can see except to accommodate teasers and pictures that are bigger than they need to be, except what gets lost is the consumer guide, which I'm supposedly providing. With books, it's the same, but it's a little more complicated. Everybody wants to compete for everybody else's attention, and newspapers and magazines feel that the only way they can do that is through graphics, not through better writing or better choices or better bylines or whatever. They try to do it through graphics and through teasing, through telling you what the piece says before you read it. All of this stuff. However, even at the Times Book Review, which unlike the LA Times gets a significant amount of book advertising, it's gone way down. It's gone way down. So the real threat to the book reviewing is the amount of print, period, that a newspaper is willing to devote to book reviewing medium. In my day at the Times Book Review, we would run 70-page issues almost every week, and it was just, and it was the same. The New Yorker at that time in the 60s and 70s. We think of that as the glory days of John McPhee giving you everything you never wanted to know about oranges in three separate excerpts. But the fact of the matter is that William Shawn had an enormous amount of space because he had an enormous amount of advertising, and we don't have that advertising anymore, and we certainly don't have it for books. And so they never advertised outside in Boston or Los Angeles, or San Francisco, or Chicago. They simply wouldn't do it. But now they're not even advertising in the Times. They're finding better places to put they think better places to put their money, and that's I'm sorry to say is the real threat. If you look at you've lost about a third of the words, almost everywhere. Yes, you're right. About a third of the words, but the pages you've lost that you never see are the worst loss.
Is there another question? A last question over there?
When an author writes a letter to the editor and says that review really sucked, is there an ethical piece there? Do you always print it, never print it? Does the reviewer get to respond? I know different publications handle it differently, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
We rarely publish letters to the editor only because of space. And in fact, we're in the process of, I think we're going to start running a letters to the editor column on the website because we have the space. But for me, I mean, it sort of touches back on what John was saying. For me, given limited space, I would give the space to a review rather than to a letter, unless it's a letter, unless something egregious has occurred, in which case we need to come clean about it. My general policy wouldn't be to let the reviewer respond, only because I feel like it starts a conversation that I'm not sure benefits anyone. And I think the real question, too, is what is the author, if the author, we get these letters all the time, if it's just as simply this review sucked and they didn't understand how great my book was, okay, I understand that, I've been there. If it's something where they say this review was wrong or unethical or there's a conflict of interest here that you missed, then, that bears investigation beyond simply publishing the letter and having some kind of response to it. We would then sort of talk to the author or the person who'd sent the letter and find out what it is exactly that they're talking about, and then we'd look into it and see whether there was merit to it. And if there's merit to it, we'd have to do something about it. But that's a long roundabout way of answering your question.
Something important here. It's almost always a mistake for the author to write that letter. And it never looks good. And if the magazine in question actually allows the reviewer to respond, it's going to look worse. I remember vividly once Alfred Kazin taking grave exception to something that Joan Didion had written in the Times Book Review in my tenure. I can't remember what it was, but he went on and on and on in the highest possible dudgeon, basically saying she was a young whippersnapper and had no right to blah, blah, blah. And it was Alfred Kazin. I felt I had to run the letter. But I also felt that I had to allow Didion a chance to respond, and she did. And what we ran this long letter from Alfred Kazin, and then it says, Joan Didion replies, "Oh, come off it, Alfred." But guess who won that?
The whippersnapper rose. One quick comment just on the shorter reviews about how ridiculous this is in newspapers, then we can break. In my own case, we had sort of endlessly dwindling reviews until they were down on our daily reviews till about 200 words, and then my legendary editor-in-chief, Gene Roberts, said to me, "These reviews aren't worth shit." I said, yeah, well, those are your people who are making them not worth shit. They keep pressing it down, so why don't we just get rid of them? I said, well, could I have that space to put it together into at least one more review? Because I agreed they weren't worth anything, and that happened. But sometimes upper editors at newspapers that are not even conscious that their own processes are creating the crap that they then don't like in their own paper. Thank you, everybody. We're going to put out the results of this survey within the next week or so. Some of you are NBCC members. We want to figure out a way that you can get in to all the comments. As I said, 1,800 comments. Fascinating stuff. It's a very funny group, lots of witty material. So we'll get you into that survey and we'll announce it. And again, thanks to the panelists. Good discussion.